and welcome to the Black Cat Bushcraft channel. Today I wanted to do a short video on some of the most basic knife techniques that I use when I'm out in the woods bushcrafting. Most people would agree that your most important tool as a woodsman is your knife, and knowing how to use that tool to the maximum of its potential will definitely help you to get along better and have a better time in the woods. So today let's go over just some of the basic techniques, and most of these you may already know or use, but there might be one or two that maybe you're not using that will help you to accomplish some of your bushcrafting tasks just a little bit easier. So stick with me and we'll go through them one by one. Alright, the first knife technique that's probably the most basic that everyone will know is what I call a hammer grip. And that's when you just hold your knife in your hand like you would hold a hammer. Of course the blade is out. And the way that's used is you simply slip your knife across your material, making a cut. When I do that, I personally pull my material back as I push my knife forward, and that tends to give me deeper cuts if I'm trying to take lots of material off at one time. But you can hold your material stationary and just make controlled slices across that material if you prefer. So both are reasonable methods. The only downside to a hammer grip is if you're working in a small or confined space, that could be an issue when that knife goes away from your body. Or if other people are in your general vicinity, that could become a safety hazard. So this is a great technique, and it works very well as long as you have plenty of space to safely utilize that. But that is what I call hammer grip. Now, the second technique that I utilize is turning the hammer grip backwards so that the blade now points towards me. And with that, I can create what's called a chest lever cut. And all that is where you have your blade pointing away from you, and you have your material there, and you use your back muscles to pull. If you're using this movement, you're using your tricep and your bicep basically, which are relatively small muscles in comparison to your back muscles. So with this, I can utilize that much larger muscle group using my back to pull apart like that, while at the same time keeping my knife inside the line of my body. Right? So anytime my knife leaves the line of my body, that becomes more uncontrollable, whereas if I can keep my knife inside the line of my body, I can control that and maintain it in a safe space. But the chest lever grip or chest lever cut is a really good technique to take lots of wood off very quickly and very safely. Alright, the next technique I want to show you is one of my personal favorites that I use a lot. And it works with the same knife grip that you used on that chest lever. And that's basically just a backwards hammer grip. Turn the knife so that the blade points back towards you. What I'll do is I'll place my material that I'm cutting on against my body. And now I'm going to draw the knife towards me. Some people may think that this would be a dangerous way to carve. But the thing about it is your thumb joint is always going to hit your chest before your knife blade. So the way you're carving, it's impossible for you to actually cut yourself. And the thing I like about this most is it just gives you so much control to cut very shallow in your material and remove very fine amounts of material. So if you're carving something like a spoon or spatula, that type of thing, and you want to be very careful in the last part of that carving process and remove very fine amounts of material, this is the best way to do it that I've found. You can see the little cuts that I'm doing. It's almost like a feather stick. So it gives me very fine, controlled cuts. And the nice thing about it is it's very safe for me and others because once again, that knife is inside the line of my body at all times. So it doesn't pose a hazard to other people that may be with me in my camp, and it doesn't pose a danger to myself because of that grip. And that's just what I call a draw cut. Just drawing your knife in to make your cuts. Usually it's not recommended that you put your thumb on the spine of your knife. However, there are certain circumstances where that grip can be very beneficial. Let's say I want to bevel the edge of this stick right here, maybe to make a stake or something like that, a tent stake to drive into the ground, and I don't want this end to mushroom out. I could just use a hammer cut, and if I do that, notice where my knife went. It went all the way off screen, covering a lot more distance. However, if I put my thumb on the back of this knife, and I use my offhand thumb as well, I can very short and controlled make cuts to bevel that edge. And I actually feel like I'm controlling how much material I'm removing a lot better than with that hammer grip. So I can, again, in a very short space, which is always nice for safety, and a very controlled cut, which helps me get better overall results, I can do that fine carving, just using my thumbs rather than using my arm muscles. Now, one note, you always want to make sure that your finger is behind the material. So if for some reason I forget and slip, that knife can absolutely nick your finger. As long as you keep your finger back behind the material, the knife is going to slide off and away and never catch that finger. So that's definitely something you want to pay attention to when you're doing these types of cuts. But that's you can use a single thumb or double thumb. I like double thumb. I feel like I get more control and more power with that cut. But that's just a basic push cut or assisted cut using those thumbs. Alright, this next technique is what I refer to as a rocking cut, and that's probably not an official title, that's just how I refer to it. And it's because you put your knife on your material or your work and you just rock back and forth. Kind of like a chef would use with a chef's knife, but when I'm doing that, I'm creating a stop cut in my wood. It's just slowly eating down into the wood. Another method is to turn the work itself and hold the knife more stationary as you're pressing down. So you can use that method, or especially right here at the curve of your blade, you can get a lot of leverage there and work that curve down into your wood. And what that does for you is it can give you a nice deep stop cut when you're making notches and so forth, things like that. That gives you that stop cut. Now, a substitute for that would be to just simply use a baton and beat the back of your knife. But if you don't want to do that, this is another method, using that rocking action with your knife. Another thing that you can do with this that you often see in bushcraft is where people make a pot hanger hook. And so you have to create an X down in your work, those stop cuts. And this is a slight amount more work than batoning, but if you don't want to go that route, this is another way you can do it. And then from there, you can just come back in and cut into those stop cuts, and you'll be able to create your hook this way. And then here again, just work those down, rock the knife, and it helps you eat in there. Again, right here, rocking that blade, that way I can cut up in there just like that. Now you can see where that's starting to go, and I can clean that up and work the material out to create the actual hook with that. And I'm going to use a different technique for that in just a second. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that rocking technique and how it's used. Alright, the next technique is what I refer to as choking up on the knife. So I'm going to release the handle and then come way up here on the blade and hold it close to the tip, or wherever I want to work on this particular blade. And so by doing that, I actually get a lot more control. I've always heard that the further your hand is from your cutting edge, the less control you really have, and vice versa. The closer your hand is to your cutting edge, the more fine control you have of that. Let's say this little pot hook that I cut out while ago using the rocking cut, let's say I want to get in here and clean out up under here and make that hook just a little bit better in there. This would be a great technique to do that, because I can control really good what I'm doing. Rather than being way back here on the knife and I feel a little more awkward back there, I choke up on that blade, and now I can get down in there and do that most fine, minute little bit of work. And make those really fine cuts without taking a chance of messing up my piece. And you can do this both ways. You can turn the blade up more like a reverse, like this would be more like the reverse hammer grip, or you can use it in a hammer grip fashion like I was just doing. But you can absolutely reverse it just like this and be choked up on the blade and get down in there and do those cuts. Sometimes it's good to reverse it and then come back the opposite way. And just in that short time, I was able to dig out underneath that hook, and you can see how much more pronounced that hook is now. So it's really good for just that little bitty fine stuff that you might want to do where you need the maximum amount of control, whether you're going forward or away. If you're going away, you want to move your hand. I don't want to be holding here and cutting towards my hand. I'm going to release that, and now I can cut like this. One more way that you can utilize choking up on your blade, kind of like scissors works. Scissors are two blades that operate on a fulcrum, Basically, you only have one blade, but you can move the material, and using your thumbs also as a push cut, kind of like we talked about a moment ago, you can work into the wood in a very controlled fashion. You're not going to slip and cut too far or anything. You can really control that, but you can remove material fast with that too. And it's a way that you can create different types of notches. This one's just kind of you see what I did, just kind of work out a divot in the wood, which might be handy if you were going to lash two poles together perpendicular. You could use this type of thing just to kind of get a better surface for them to mate with. But you can see how I'm doing that. I'm just working the two, kind of like a pair of scissors operates, and using that thumb and that push cut to get that very fine, controlled cut there. And again, that's just utilizing choking up on my blade to get more control. Alright, the last technique that I'm going to mention today is drilling. And that's when you use the very tip of your knife to push down and you turn your knife. And obviously you can use that to bore a hole in the wood. That's pretty much self-explanatory. You can use your knife while the material's stationary, or you can do this and work both pieces, the knife and the material, together. One word of caution is you never do this. You never hold your material here, because if it splits, my knife goes through my hand. Or if I slip in some way, I may cut myself. So you always want to have your material somewhere safe, and then you can work that knife and press down and not be afraid of going through and hitting your hand. You can also put this up against a tree and bore while you're standing up. It doesn't have to be down. I just like drilling downward like this, because now my shoulder and my upper body weight again is over top of the knife, and rather than pushing with my arm, I can just kind of put weight on that, and that will help me to bore through my material, as you see here. Also, when you're drilling, sometimes instead of being perpendicular to your material, you can come down here at a different angle. Let's say maybe 50, 60 degrees up, not 45, because that would be too low, but maybe 50, 60 degrees. And now I can use more of the blade to help create a divot, just like this. Like, let's say I was carving a bow drill set and I wanted to create the divot to start my spindle. This would be a method I could do that with. And I'm just utilizing a larger portion of the blade to help remove that material and create that little divot to get started there. Alright, so whether it's perpendicular like this, or whether you change that angle to utilize more blade, all of that is what I call drilling technique. Alright, I believe we've covered most of the basic techniques and knife grips that I utilize while bushcrafting. As a woodsman, I feel like it's very important for us to know how to maximize our number one tool and use it in the most safe and effective way. At one time, I can remember all I did with my knife was this motion, as I just didn't know any others. And no one particularly taught me these different types of techniques, but through using my knife in the woods and trying to find better ways and safer ways to use it, that's how I've learned these different techniques. I know there's a lot of other knife skills videos on YouTube. Take the time to watch them and experiment with those different techniques. And most important, find out what works for you. Because the way I do it may not be the exact way you want to do it, or the exact way that somebody else demonstrates. But this is what works for me. So that's the key, is to work with your knife, experiment with it, get comfortable with it, and find out the techniques to help you get the best results when you're out in the woods. I appreciate you guys taking the time to tune in. I hope that this has been beneficial for you. I hope to talk to you again with another video as soon as possible. And until that time, take care and God bless.